Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Ostrowski. You might also find me on some of the key ancestry sites under the username genealogist. I'm on Ancestry by that, Family Search, and I also go on various Facebook groups and email discussion forums. Today, I want to share with you one of my top 2 tactics that I use in my advanced genealogy research. And I think this is one method that will improve our entire genealogy community, as well as advance your own specific goals if we start following this instead of the ways that we are typically recording dates from documents. So what this is going to be about is implied dates that are in the records. We see this all the time, and I'm going to teach you how to precisely record what that document is stating around an implied date. So what's the big deal about this? Why do I say this is one of my top 2 tactics? I'm going to explain a few reasons behind this. First, it's a tactic and a technique that can extract more data from the records that you already have. Most of genealogy, we're trying to find new records or trying to find missing records. So what we want to do is every record that we do have or document, we want to make sure we're extracting all the key information from that is provided and not overlooking anything. So as you learn about this technique I'm about to share, or the method of recording, you might be able to go back and revisit the documents that you already have on your computer or in your research files and apply this to them and update some of the information you already have. One good thing about going through existing documents is sometimes you also recognize or pick up on some clue that you didn't pick up on the first time you went around. So that's one key thing. Second, and this is probably the most important, is that we're going to move from vague and not very meaningful dates such as, quote, about 1838 or circa 1839. And I'm going to explain why that doesn't really make sense, and it's an incorrect way of recording this information. So we're going to move from that type of date recording, which is very common today, to something very much more precise, such as between the 2nd of June, 1838 and the 1st of June, 1839. As you can see, that gives us a much clearer range than about 1838. So after you learn this method, I want us all to stop recording incorrect data from a record. We're all recording it incorrectly when we write about 1838. When you use this and you record in this manner, then you can potentially solve difficult research problems with information you already have. Like I said at the beginning, you can do this on existing records. So if you're stuck, especially on some of these early 19th century or 18th century records, here's a way that you can go back and apply this and potentially solve some of those difficult problems. That's worked out for me in a few of my early 19th century research problems. We also want to be better historians and improve the community, the genealogy community that we work with, as well as the extended family history and local history communities that are associated with that. This will be an accurate way of recording exactly what that document is stating as a historian would. So it's very important in this type of approach to distinguish between accuracy and precision. There are meaningful definitions there in the scientific community, and I'm going to apply those here as well to genealogy and history. So from an accuracy perspective, that is stating how close a value in a document is to the true value. For example, if a document says that I was born on March 2nd, then it's accurate if I was actually born on March 2nd, but if somebody made a mistake or an error and I was really born on March 1st, then that document is not accurate. Genealogy records, as we know, vary significantly in accuracy. That's why we need to collect multiple pieces of evidence, because one may be more accurate than the other. They both might be inaccurate, but the more piles of documents we can create that are associated with each other, the better evidence that we have that we're closer to the true value of what actually happened in time. The original record creator might have been inaccurate. Census takers, death certificate informants, cemetery, even Tombstone inscriber sometimes made a mistake, right? We can't go back in history and change that. We can't change whoever recorded that on a certain document. So we have to go and judge accuracy based on the strength of the evidence and the amount of documentation and associated circumstantial evidence that we can collect on a certain ancestor, locality, or otherwise history. Now, precision is what this method is going to be about. And precision is about how specific and repeatable a value in a document is. So we have been recording implied date information incorrectly from records. We've been recording it imprecisely. There is a precise way of recording implied date records, and that's what we need to start doing. And that's what I'm going to be teaching you today. When we record precisely, it means that no matter who picks up that document and records a date range that is implied in that document, it will be recorded the same way. And that's not what we're doing today. We have people recording things like about 1838, around 1840, between 1840 and 1841, which sometimes are not what the document is actually stating, and I'll be showing that. So we are overlooking the more specific information that are in these records that we already have today, and that might help us significantly. So this implied date method is about precision, not accuracy. And I want to establish that up front, because when I have discussed this with a few people on groups, their first thing is, oh, well, that doesn't mean that. How do you know that's accurate? Or how do you know that's the right value? That's no different than saying about 1838. It actually is when you talk about precision. Accuracy, we can't change. No matter what method you record, whatever stated in that document, you can't go back in history and change that. So we're going to talk about how to record what's written, how to record that in our history. So what is a precise date? So if we're lucky, a record might give an exact date. So here's a tombstone example, one of my ancestors, and it says specifically the day that he was born and died. 17th of December, 1868, died 18th of April, 1930. This is easy to record. When we open up our genealogy programs, they'll give us usually fields for day, month, and year, or we type it in a certain format. Here it has right for us. Everybody's going to record this the same way. If I gave this tombstone picture to 5 different people, they're probably going to record the same. This also makes it easy to calculate ages at any point in time. So we know an exact birthday. We can go, and any time in between this birth and death date, we can calculate how old Malin was down to the day level. Okay. Remember again, this doesn't mean it's accurate. Tombstones can even be inscribed incorrectly. Even the death date can be incorrect on tombstones. Okay. I'm talking about precision, and here we're giving a specific, precise date. Implied dates. The record might give information here that can be used to imply a date. And usually this comes in the form of an age at a certain time of recording. What I'm going to say today is that there is an exact correct way to record the implied dates precisely. It does take a little bit extra math, but there are tools that we can use to do that math for us, or I find it kind of fun in a way to keep my mind engaged to do this mentally as well. In this record, we see a marriage record between Walter Oxley and Grace Moore. The record date is the 6th of November, 1915. So that is a key date. That's the date we're given. And Walter's age is given as 22 years old on this document. Now, here's what we commonly see in genealogy. Somebody records on this. They take that November 6, 1915. They usually just take the year. So they say 1915. They subtract 22 years from that, and they end up with 1893, and they end up writing about 1893. Some people might have written 1893 itself. This record isn't actually saying that he was born about 1893. What it's stating, if you were to give the implied date, is that he was born between the 7th of November, 1892 and the 6th of November, 1893. Now, explain why that is. As you can see, that's a much different recording method than about 1893. It gives us a 12-month range with a little bit of 1892 in there, and most of 1893. So for implied dates, what information is required? First, I'm going to call it the record date, the date where the record on which the record was created. A valid date, which is the date at which the value was supposedly valid. And I'll explain what that is. Usually that's the same as the record date, but not necessarily. So for example, on that marriage record, the record date is when the person applied for the license and they gave their age. So the age value of 22 was valid on the same date of the record date. However, there are times when that is different, and the most common time in genealogy is on census records. Now I'm going to use the term value for the value given in the record. So in this case, it's the number 22 for the number of years old. And then the implied date is a given date or a date range that's implied by that value and the valid date. So for example, on the marriage record, the fact that we're given an age in years and a valid date on the date of the license allows us to imply when his birth date was. So I mentioned the census as a common example when there's differentiations. I'm going to use that example to show what each of these means. So on an 1860 USA census, for example, the record date might be 18th of June, 1860. That's the date that the census taker went around and visited the household. It's usually written on top of the census sheet. Sometimes it's written elsewhere or not at all, but that's the day that they actually went around. However, as you should know, on the census, there's supposed to be a valid date, and the information that is provided is supposed to be as of the 1st of June, 1860. How old was Jane? How old was Joe? Okay. Now, I suspect that when there is a difference between that valid and record date, I suspect that many times people were giving the current value as opposed to thinking back in time a couple of weeks and what was valid on the 1st of June, but that's just a suspicion. The actual instructions were supposed to be, what are the values in this information as of the census day? Okay, so the value might be the age, for example, 23 years old. Jane might be 23 years old, as written by the census taker. Now, the implied date in this scenario is supposed to take the value at the valid date, and we can work backwards and say what this record is stating is that she was born between the 2nd of June, 1836 and the 1st of June, 1837. So when an age is given as 10 years old on a specific record date or valid date and records only the years, let's think about what that means. The person is stating that they are at least 10 years old, but not yet 11 years old. And that's the key thought here. In other words, the youngest that person could be is 10 years old, 0 months, 0 days. I just turned 10 today, so I'm going to say I'm 10. The oldest that the person could be is 10 years old, 11 months, and 30 days, a 31-day month. In other words, tomorrow I turn 11, and that's the oldest I could be if I'm giving my age as 10 years old. And that's really the method that I use when I think about doing this mentally in my head. I say, okay, if the person is the youngest possible, then their birthday was the same day as the record. And if the person is the oldest, then their birthday is tomorrow, and they will turn the next year old. Okay. So either of those ways of thinking about it, whatever works for you. That first section about 10 years old, 0 months, 0 days, that works when you're using some of the genealogy software calculators, for example. But the second one I find is easier to think of mentally. So let's give a specific example. Let's say the record date, and I'm going to say the valid date's the same as the record date here, is the 15th of December, 2000. And the age given, which is only provided in years, is 15 years. So then the youngest person who could give this value of 15 years would have had their birthday on December 15th, the same day as this record date. And they just turned 15 years old. So their birthday would be the 15th of December, 1985, exactly 15 years ago. The oldest the person would be that they are turning 16 years old the next day, or the 16th of December, 2000. And if that were the case, if they were going to be 16 on the 16th of December 2000, then their birthday would be the 16th of December 1984. So if we put those two together, the oldest to the youngest, the record is really stating that the person was born between the 16th of December 1984 and the 15th December 1985. That's what the record is actually stating. This record is not stating that they were born about 1985. If you write it that way, that's your own addition of data or your own interpretation of data. It's not what the record is stating. Sometimes we'll get ages that are given in years and months or just months. This is very common on censuses with infants that were born within the last year. So let's do that example in months. Same record date, 15th of December 2000. The age value given here could be years and months, but no days. And let's say it's written as a 6-month-old. Person is 6 months old. Then the youngest person with that value would have again had their birthday on the same day as the record date, or the 15th of December 2000, and they just turned 6 months old. So you back up 6 months and you're in June. I like to translate the months to the numeric month. So December 12 minus 6 would be 6, or June. So their birthday would be the 15th of June 2000. Now the oldest this person could be, that's giving this value, would be that they were turning 7 months old the following day, or the 16th of December 2000. So we would start that day, the next day, 16th of December 2000, we'd back up 7 months and get to May. And their birthday would be the 16th of May 2000. So what this record is stating is that the person was born between the 16th of May in 2000 and the 15th of June 2000. Now, here's where things can get pretty powerful, especially when we're assessing multiple layers of evidence. Let's say we have 2 records and we've recorded the dates, the implied dates, the correct way. So we have the first record saying the person was born between 1st of June 1950 and the 31st of May 1951. And the second record, when we recorded the implied dates, is showing that the person was born between the 1st of April 1950 and the 31st of March 1951. So now if we stack those 2 record ranges together, those date ranges that we recorded, and we see where the overlap was, we now have a 9-month window for the real date. Again, this is assuming the record is accurate, and that's a whole different discussion and a whole different judgment call. Let's say we have 2 records of similar accuracy. So we have a 9-month window for the real date. I put the red bars there so you can see it visually. It's either the 1st of June 1950 up through the 31st of March 1951. We've narrowed down a 12-month range, or even more than a 12-month range if we went and wrote about 1850. We've narrowed that down to 9-month window for the real date. Now, when we're searching through records, or you're having to browse through extensive, probate, land records, etc., shaving off 3 months in a chronological search is a big deal. It saves you a lot of time. Like I said, nothing says both these records are accurate. This is just an example of how you might write up your conclusions, prioritize how you search for those records, or write up your notes. So kind of the second topic, I said this is the first of 2 techniques. The second topic is more philosophical, and that's about every time we have a document, we should be recording it historically, the information in the document, and then everything above and beyond that in terms of coming to conclusions or adding color to an individual story or a family story is our own writing, is our own addition or interpretation of these documents. But that's for another conversation. So when we end up with multiple records, in this case I showed 2 just for the simplicity of this, but if we ended up with 5 or 6 records and we started looking at these overlaps and put them on a chart, for example, if they're all converging on these overlapped windows, and maybe they all show a 3-month window that fits within all those 5 records, that really increases the strength of the data that we have, that we can start to use in our conclusions or interpretations that that person was born, for example, in this 3-month window. Okay, so back to that example of a marriage license here with Walter and Grace. we're going to go back and plug in those numbers into the formulas I showed. So let's say the valid date here is the 6th of November, 1915. That's written at the date of the license. That's when they wrote out that they were 22 years old and 21 years old. So let's start with Walter at age 22. So given that valid date, given the age, the youngest that Walter could be is that he just turned 22 on that day, in which case the month and date of his birth would also be the 6th November. And then we could subtract the 22 exactly and come up with 1893. So the youngest he could be is born the 6th of November, 1893. Now, if he's the oldest that he could possibly be with this information, then he'd be turning 23 tomorrow. In that case, the month and day of his birth would be the 7th of November. But now he would be 23 on the 7th of November of 1915. So we'd back up 23 years, and that pushes us back an extra year, and we'd end up with him being born the 7th of November, 1892. We put those two together and we end up with what the record is actually stating, which is that he was born between the 7th of November, 1892 and the 6th of November, 1893. And that's how we should be recording this in our genealogy records for this document. Now, going to Grace, she is age 21. If you're quick with math, you might just be able to adjust Walter's data above. But if we go through this example again, she either just turned 21 on that day, the 6th of November, 1915, in which case her month and day of birth are the 6th of November, and you'd back up the 21 years as written, and you'd end up with the 6th of November, 1894. The oldest she could be is that she'd be turning 22 tomorrow, the next day of the record, the 7th of November, 1915. So you go to the 7th of November, you'd back up 22 years, and you'd end up with the 7th of November, 1893. So now you put those two together, and she's born between 7th of November, 1893 and 6th of November, 1894. Okay, now let's look at a tombstone example, another very common one to use this technique for. And here we have a John Smith, and the valid date would be when he died, when that was written. So the age that's provided is supposed to be valid as of the 23rd of September, 1871. We're given his age as 74 years and 8 months. Let's apply those examples. So the youngest he could be is that he just turned 74 years and 8 months on the 23rd of September, 1871. We would keep the day, so it's 23rd, but we'd back up 8 months. September is numeric month 9, I'd back up 8 to get me to the first month, or January. So 23rd of January. And then I would back up 74 years from that, which takes me to 1797. So the youngest that this John Smith could be on this tombstone record is born the 23rd of January, 1797. Now the oldest he could be is that he's turning 74 years and 9 months tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 24th of September. So we would start with the 24th of December, and we would back up. The oldest that John Smith could be would be that he's turning 74 years and 9 months tomorrow, or basically 1 month older. Now, we would go to September 24th, the next day after this record, and then we would back up 9 months instead of 8 months. That takes us back to the 24th of December, 1 month earlier than the 23rd of January, which pushes us back a year, 24th of December, 1796. So you combine those two bits of information, and you end up being able to record that this tombstone says he was born between the 24th of December, 1796 and the 23rd of January, 1797. Now we have a 1 month window that crosses 2 years for which we can look for the record, if this were accurate. Okay. Now the tombstones, especially on website Find a Grave, the way people record this is probably the one of the worst examples I see, because what many people do on the tombstones is they will just take, for example, 1871, subtract 74 years, and then say just about 1797. When really, there's a whole 1 month window of information sitting here on this record. Even worse, a lot of times on Find a Grave, the birth date will be left completely blank. And I guess there's different reasons for that. I see some people thinking you shouldn't use calculated dates on that field or whatever, but that really hinders people that are searching on a site like Find a Grave, because if you do put a birth date, it's not going to be able to match that against the Tombstone record. So I think there's definitely some improvements we can do there on the Find a Grave side. Maybe that's the way you record it, or maybe it's the website itself allowing there to be fields like this, reported date, reported age at death, or something like that. So another example is a census. I'm going to walk us through a live demonstration as well of recording a census record. But here's one just to write it out, and it's a little hard to read, like most census records of the 1800s. This one's 1910. But up top, you can see the difference between the record date and the valid date. So up top, the census taker wrote that this was enumerated by him on the 25th of April, 1910. Like I said before, the valid date, however, is 15th of April, 1910. So that's the census day in the year 1910 census. All the values here were supposed to be recorded as of their value on April 15th, even though the census taker was coming to your house on April 25th. Again, I have a feeling that many people did not kind of catch that nuance. So here we have two interesting bits of information. We have the age on the first line there, an age given of 69 years, and the second line, the age given of 59 years. Now, I've given a couple of age examples, so what I'd like you to do is you could pause here and come up with your answer to the implied birth date range for those two individuals. Instead, I'll go down to the marriage item. So both of them are shown as being married for 45 years. Hopefully that value is the same there for a married couple. So the earliest they could be married is that their 45th anniversary was on the census day. So you take that 15th of April, and you'd back up the 45 years, and you'd end up that they were married on 15th April, 1865. Now the latest they could be married would be that their 46th anniversary was the following day. And again, we got to go back to the valid date. This is supposed to be 15th of April, 1910. So go to the next day, 16th of April, and then we back up 46 years, and we end up with 16th of April, 1864. Combine those two together, and the implied date range that's given in this 1910 census is that they were married between the 16th of April, 1864 and the 15th of April, 1865. Now, this is where sometimes it gets interesting because people will they'll go ahead and write, oh, about 1865, when really more of that range is sitting in 1864, okay? So after all this, this can seem complicated. Oh, there's some math involved, right? It's easier to just write about 1862. Everybody has been doing it for decades, maybe centuries, right? It's easier to do. Why not just do the easy route? Well, I'm going to give you several reasons if you haven't already realized this yourself. So the first is meaning. When you see about 1862, what does that mean to you? Does it mean in 1862, in that year somewhere? Does it mean 1862, give or take a year? Does it mean 1862, give or take 5 years? Okay, there's many different ways to read about 1862. So what might that mean to other people if you record that? If you record that, you're introducing your own variability and vagueness into recording of documents. And instead of just showing you a precise way of recording it, that is exactly what the document states. And you can allow people to make their own conclusions or judgment calls about what that document, how that document might play into the full story of the family or individual. Now, there is a case where writing about 1862 is the correct way to record what a document says. Can you think of a reason why you would actually record about 1862 correctly? Okay, I'll tell you, the answer is If the document itself actually says about 1862, then you would record about 1862. Again, you want to record exactly what the document is stating or implying. But that's the only scenario. You don't want to go and change a precise implied date into something more vague and general like this. That could confuse others. About 1862 is also just plain incorrect. The record does not actually state that. You are stating that. So like I said before, there is one correct time that you would record it about 1862, and that's only if those words are exactly in the record that you're looking at. What the document actually states about implied dates is what we've gone through earlier, which is a date range between the valid dates on the record. If you write about 1862, you might miss a pattern in those overlapping date records, and those overlapping records could help you in many ways, solving brick walls, narrowing down your research time, helping you jump to browsing large books down to a fraction of that book, et cetera, et cetera. You might miss that pattern. If you just write about 1862 for everything, you might miss that actually what you're seeing is between October 1861 and February 1862, giving you a 4-month window that spreads over 2 years. Okay, so this helps you focus down and observe or detect patterns in the data that you already have. Like I said, you might waste your time or other people's time looking for records in the right time period. Because of the different ways that can be interpreted, people might go browsing the whole 1862 record. They might start off and say, my research plan is to look from 1860 to 1864, because that's what I think about when I hear about 1862, okay? When you can give instead a list of precise dates that those documents are implying, you shrink down that research time, you shrink down the focus of somebody's research plan, and you're increasing the very meaning of what precision is, a repeatable, consistent way of recording data. So even though there's a little extra work, as a genealogist, especially as one watching this video, you're taking this seriously and you can do better with just that little bit extra work. It also keeps your mind sharp. That's the way I like to think of it when I do this. I would much rather just easily write, about 1862, but this gives me just a little bit of a mental math as well. I find the date of the record, subtract the year, for example, or then I kind of jump ahead by 1 day and then subtract 1 more year, for example. I find that those little tactics are good. Sometimes the numbers are such that I don't quite trust my quick calculation in my head. So in that case, there are tools such as the Legacy Family Trees Date Calculator, where you can go and double check yourself, or just jump to that right away if you don't like doing mental math. So next steps, what I like you to start doing after watching this video is first stop writing about 1862 when you have a record date and an age. When you have that, like I said before, it's an incorrect, imprecise way of recording what's written on a document. There is a precise and correct way to record what you are reading off that document and translate that into implied dates. And that precision is repeatable if we all start doing that. Start being precise then and record that exact date range that the record implies. Go back through some of your research, revisit your research where this might help narrow down age ranges, and focus your search on those records. That's what I'm currently been doing. My brick walls in early 19th century, early 1800s, John R. Smith, and I've been going through probate records in counties and surrounding counties, and being able to go and narrow down a date range chops off dozens of hours of work that I would otherwise have to spend going through multiple books of these records. Combine your records that you have already on these overlapping date ranges, however that might work for you, either if you can do that by numbers in your head or draw a little bar chart on a calendar or a timeline like I did earlier in this presentation, and start seeing if there's a pattern emerging on the overlapping dates. Draw those lines like I did across any overlapping region, and then see if something emerges. You might end up taking a previous 1 to 2 year range, and you could end up bringing that down to 2 or 3 months. Okay, and that's going to make your work look much better. And please share this method with others. The reason I made this video is because I want to improve the genealogy community. This is a method I think we should all be taught at the start. And if we were to all follow this method, it'd be easier for me to read other people's research, and it'll be easier for others to read yours. So share this video with somebody. I might post 1 or 2 other videos if you'd like to subscribe on YouTube. Right now, my intention is not to make a full genealogy channel, but rather just share a couple of the key points. But go ahead and subscribe on that if you'd like to do that. And you can also share this link out to others that you think could benefit from this type of technique. So thank you for watching this presentation. I appreciate you taking the time to learn how to be more precise in the recording and a better historian. And I hope that you've learned at least one, if not multiple, techniques here that you can use in your own research in solving some of the difficult challenges you and others will have now and in the future. Have a great day. Again, my name is Steve Ostrowski. I go by Genealogist on the popular ancestry websites, and I'm also on Facebook groups. You can send me a message through this YouTube video, or you can put comments below, and I love talking genealogy, so I'd be happy to chat with anybody further. Thanks again. Have a great day.